am the Director of Research, Education, and Programs, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on at Wagyu. I was hired on to create the Wagyu EPD for carcasses, and trying to get you guys through my journey of that. It pointed me towards camera technology and grading using cameras. So I'm going to point you through how we kind of utilize these cameras in our industry and how it can reflect into yours. So traditional grading within the US relies on, as you go on, set grades from 100 to 1190, ranging from select to prime, and all those subcategories in between by about 10 points. So you max out about at 1199. They're not really based on IMF. So there's one paper, I think back in the 80s, which is old for me, sorry, that explained that about 12% IMF is prime, but that was done way back then. I think that needle has possibly shifted. So the USDA is working towards updating grades with IMF percentages, but that isn't out yet. And so we have no kind of new updated range with IMFs. So Wagyu beef many times grades way outside of that top range. So I said around 12% is that top range of prime. We're working with 40 to 50% sometimes. So how do I solve that problem? If it's gonna max out 1199, how do I get to the top? Grading cameras seem to be the answer. I don't know how many of you have come in contact with these, but they've kind of swept the industry for Wagyu. So they give a predicted IMF value based on an image. You're able to capture the top end of Wagyu marbling. So it'll output those high IMF percentages, those kind of crazy guys that we really want to take on in the Wagyu industry. So on your left, that is kind of a traditional full blood strip, something that's very common in our industry. And on the right, that's the highest prime grading of USDA. So the highest prime grading is kind of our average, what we see in full blood. But then we see these crazy guys. So you'd see that this is way out there, and you know, that top grading range doesn't really capture that. We really want to know who these guys are, right? So these camera grading technologies have been great in identifying those. So on the market right now, these are the major big ones we've been working with. So the MIJ is out of Japan, the MEQ is out of Australia, the Master Beef also out of Australia, the E+V is out of Germany. Kind of the cool thing you can see with all of these, they're all handheld and they're all fueled by a camera. For the MIJ, you actually get a Google Pixel and then kind of put that little camera hood on it. The hood in the E+V, Master Beef, and MIJs to control lighting. We really want standardization with those pictures to make sure they're going into the algorithm correctly and you're getting the right output. You don't get white cast or any of that stuff. But the MEQ is the new one on the scene, and it's actually a video that collects an image from the frames collected during that video. So you take your phone, you go like this over it, and it's able to kind of piece together an image from that video. It's supposed to be at chain speed, which would be huge because with the other cameras, you have to stop, take a picture, make sure it's lined up, and it'll kick it back if it doesn't get a correct picture. So this MEQ could be a kind of game changer when we talk about that, you know, chain speed time, how important it is for those packing plants to make sure that they have these graded on time. So AI in a different sense, I know you guys all know AI for something else, but I know it as artificial intelligence. And I have brushed elbows with computer scientists, so I am not a computer scientist, but I know just enough to hopefully explain to you the breakdown of it. So general theory, you create an algorithm and it looks for characteristics in a reference group and then outputs something else. So in this case, with these cameras, your reference group is a bunch of images. We're going to output numbers that represent those images through all these hidden layers. So camera takes a picture and then is run through that algorithm. Don't get overwhelmed by the algorithm. It's just looking for certain things. Color, the structure, white to black pixels, even fleckness of that, like how it's in the picture that you sent through it. And the output is what I just said, IMF, fineness, color, things we can put into our carcass evaluation. So I am getting to kind of lean on artificial intelligence as a tool to make sure our carcass evaluation is capturing all of our genetic variation in Wagyu. But how good are these cameras? Are they actually giving good outputs? The main question is, are these usable? So we decided to put together a camera project with the USDA, ourselves, and Colorado State, looking at a couple of these cameras against traditional grading methods, so the USDA, and a baseline approximate analysis, so just like a lab analysis. I'm going to call that my true example, kind of my baseline. And this paper is currently in final review in MMB by Dr. Skanga's lab at Colorado State. Hopefully y'all will be able to read about this. So the data that were utilized, we had all the animals were F1 Wagyu Angus crossbreds. After quality control, we had about 173 usable points. During this data collection, all animals were graded at the same time with the USDA grader, the MIJ, the master beef, and the E+V at the 12-13 rib. And then the sample was sent to the lab from that grading area. So that's kind of how we got standardization within our grades. We didn't have confounding of time of day. It kind of all happened at the same time from the same, everyone was looking at the same area. So diving a little deeper, just some basic statistics for you all. The master beef had a minimum of around 10%, and the maximum was around 40% IMF. MIJ was around 0.02, and max was 0.3. So that's just move the decimal over. So 2% and 32%. And then the E+V actually pumps out a marbling score, and that says 1147. It should be 1199. It maxed out there. And these are all F1, so we had some kind of outliers there. So this is going to be the baseline for understanding, did these cameras work? So I'm going to walk you through this. We just did Pearson correlation on the raw output of the cameras. We're going to go along the bottom. We have master beef, MIJ, that average fat percent is going to be your lab output, the E+V, and then my two graders. If you can see, the two graders did really well with the E+V and the MIJ when we're looking at the average fat percent or my true value. So it was pretty highly correlated around 0.8. They were all kind of in the same running. When we look at the cameras against themselves, they all kind of sat within the same area, and the E+V really stood out as highly correlated to the USDA marbling graders, but it does pump out a marbling score, so it probably would be more highly correlated. So this is kind of pointing to us saying, hey, that true value, that lab approximate output is a pretty good estimator at understanding the IMF percent. Just kind of looking at a regression of the lab fat percent output with each of the camera grading technologies. On the far left, you have the MIJ, the E+V, and then the master beef. Goodness of fit, you can see that line is pretty great, or R squared is 0.6, 0.65. And then the master beef had 0.32, which isn't horrible, but still did a pretty good job. What I really want to point out to you is we do have outliers, and you can kind of see them at the top of all three of these guys. We've got a guy that's way out there, the 30%, the 40% IMF percent. He doesn't fall into that trend line. So are we really capturing those guys at the top, or are we just good at capturing what we had? The problem with trying to understand that is I need a group of animals that will consistently grade at 45% IMF. And that's really hard to find. It's really expensive. So my next kind of thought process is, are those outliers being well represented? I think they are, but I think further investigation into those top percentages with these cameras is really, really needed, but very expensive. So conclusions, ongoing thoughts. The MIJ and the E+V did do the best with predicting the truth, that lab percent output. The USDA graders then cameras were really neck and neck with the truth. So they all sat around that 0.8. So they're all doing the same job, the same good job. So I feel confident in using this information. Further exploration above those USDA grades is needed. So I need something consistently hitting above prime, like a giant group hitting out of that range, to really understand if these cameras are going to be able to predict that range for me. Now, I've told you all about how it impacts me in the Wagyu industry, but how does it really impact the beef industry? And yes, it's a Wagyu bull though. So ongoing exploration, I kind of touched on it a bit when I was on that slide, but the E+V is the only camera that is currently validated by the USDA to assign a marbling score. So all of those other cameras that I talked about are going through validation, but the USDA only recognizes the E+V. So if you were to invest, you wouldn't get a grade from the USDA. The MIJ and MEQ, they're in the process of validation, they're almost done, but that can be lengthy. So the MEQ camera data has really yet to be compared to other cameras. I really combed through Google Scholar camera studies. I haven't really found any peer-reviewed research on the MEQ. I could be wrong, please tell me if you know of a paper. But this idea has actually been around for a while. The technology just hasn't been here to implement it. Quick search leads me to papers published in 2003 by Dr. Belk about using algorithms and images to predict grade. So it's been around for a while, and I think it's finally here for y'all to use. We really do need third-party validation for USDA grade, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. I think we might have a solution for that one. So how do we use this information in the Wagyu industry? So we actually published an IMF index EPD. The creation was done by the wonderful group at UGA, and the index is able to utilize all those camera outputs and weight them by their accuracy and output an IMF EPD. So every percent in that EP, or every unit in that EPD that it changes is a percent IMF. So the top goal that we have in our association right now, he's at a 3.1 IMF EPD. So that would be, you know, on average a 10% to a 13%. So that bumps you up above prime. So he's a pretty great guy. So the challenge though, you know, we have a ton of people that have already invested in these cameras or can utilize these cameras through people that they know. But the challenge is really getting all these cameras into the hands of our producers or to you. Is this really an equal opportunity, especially when the majority of our producers are very, very small. So they don't really have a way to get to a USDA graded plan, and they really want to use these camera grades. So the USDA has launched a pilot project. I don't know how much y'all know about this, but where remote grading via an image will be accessible to smaller to medium plants. It is super important for farm to table setups. This can be, you go into your small plant, you take a picture, you send it to the grader that night, and they say, yep, this is prime. Yep, this is select. Yep, this is choice. So this is a great way to kind of get that USDA stamp without needing a USDA grader at your facility. This is the same vein as that camera grading. So all these people that have invested in these cameras can now push these images toward the grader to not only have IMF percent, but kind of get it back graded by USDA to say, yeah, this is prime. So these camera images from grading devices are real-time graded by USDA grader. You can honestly just take a picture. They said you could take a picture with your iPhone. So ask the USDA about that. I don't know about that. So thinking forward, kind of what are the next steps? What is the impact? So camera grading is really the new frontier for small to medium plants. It's completely unbiased. These cameras take these images, push it through an algorithm, and give you an output. There's no human error. The only error is through the computer, which is a constant learning brain, honestly, that has no human error. It's really easy to manage. It's a cell phone pretty much with a little hood that goes on it. And the cost entrance is not horrible, I would say. It can also be operated by anyone. Training is super, super fast. I had my executive director go and look at one of these cameras, and he said it took him 2 times to get trained on one of these cameras. So it's really fast, it's accessible to anyone. The output can be directly inserted into genetic evaluations. So that IMF EPD, that prime, can go right into my genetic evaluation, but the E+V is there too, as well as that USDA grading. Once you get that picture, you get that sort of grade, that marbling grade, that will be able to be inserted into whatever your evaluations use. So more cameras do come onto the market every day. I just kind of went through the ones that I know of, but the technology is really out there. You all have cell phones. People are working on apps just to grade your beef. This is a really great option for people who don't have these giant plants that do have USDA graders. And, you know, we have some people that have gone to farmers markets and just marketed off of percent IMF from these cameras. So they're a great marketing opportunity as well. So the technology is really there, and I think it has great implications for not only Wagyu, but the whole beef US industry. And that's all I have for you.